So now that the first book in my fantasy series, The White Worm Chronicles, has seen publication, I thought it wise to discuss some of the characters within the series and sharing my thoughts and intentions with said characters, and hopefully avoiding any spoilers along the way. But you should know that the series is complete. Even now, I have the sequels ready to go. I'm not George R. R. Martin or Pat Rothfuss. The trilogy is complete, and I mean I'm done with the White Worm Chronicles. It's finished. It's got a nice little pretty bow on it, and that means that the future of these characters is has already been decided. Um, and it is for good or ill, right? Um, so yeah, give me a few more months, and you'll be reading As the Crow Flies, book two in the series. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself, actually, because today I'd like to talk about the one who has given his name to the series and to pretty much all the books in after a fashion. I'd like to talk about the closest thing that the White Worm Chronicles has to a villain, um, the devious and powerful warlord Askvargr, the Ash Wolf of Skaldland. Um, Askvargr is beyond clever, and I believe that that is maybe his most important trait is the cleverness, the charisma. He is wily and he works in mysterious ways. He's able to make himself seem like a foolish old man, this headstrong and brazen warrior, or an imperious warlord, pretty much whenever and however he wants. He is the Jarl of Wardrun in the Kingdom of Skaldland. Nominally, he's a servant of the High King of Skaldland. This is a feudal society, and Askvargr serves in a position similar to that of a Grand Duke or a governor. And yes, Skaldland is very Viking coded. Um, I believe that should kind of be obvious, and I intended it to be obvious because as much as I love to world build, it, it it's the characters that matter to me. It's the characters make or break the story, and in having these characters and places with Viking names and characters and places with very English names, etc., it sort of lets you fill in the blanks with regards to that culture without me needing to waste valuable time on exposition. Um, and I only have to show you how Skaldland is different from the traditional Viking culture, how they are more of an animist people, how they believe that every rock and every tree has a sort of soul to it, and how they're very focused on the concept of crows, and how crows have a very important part of their religion. They're seen as the keepers of the dead and the guardians of these dead spirits and what have you. Um, and it is this very culture that Askvargr, my villain, has a complicated relationship with because he is Askvargr is old and he is skilled in the arts of magic and he has traveled the world. He has learnt spells and rituals from the south and east, and he sort of isn't really working exclusively inside his own culture anymore. And in some ways, that's kind of, people see that as almost a betrayal. He's trying to speak to his people arguably without even knowing them as well as he should. He's trying to guide them when he is barely even one of them. At least that's how his enemies portray him. And I like to think that originally the Ash Wolf, as he is known, he was sort of simply doing this research into magic and such out of curiosity, like a true scholar. But slowly, as his duties as a jarl took hold, and his family grew, and shrank, and grew again, he was sort of forced to use his magic to defeat his enemies, to defend his land, his title, his family, to defend his honor. Because Askvargr is this very possessive character. He's something of a mild narcissist and a little bit of a sociopath. At least that's how he comes across. I'm sure plenty of his enemies would paint him as a out, outright heartless villain. Um, but there's a bit more to him than that, a hair more nuanced. He is a man so old and powerful that he has seen tragedy come and go and been unable to prevent it. He has seen the horrors of war and outlived more than one batch of children and possibly even grandchildren. He has suffered, and it has made him jaded. It has made him dangerous. He has only 2 children left from his most recent marriage, and they are young, and they have a complicated relationship with their father, to say the least. He is just shy of outright abusive to them, physically abusive, that is. Verbally abusive, he certainly is, especially to Alva, his the younger of the 2 children. He treats her poorly, to say the least. And yet she knows that she should love him and should respect him. And he has a certain degree of respect for her in his own twisted way. Um, and he knows how to manipulate people, even his children. And he knows how to manipulate you, because he knew your father and your grandfather and possibly your great grandfather, and his memory is long. He knows that if he says the right thing at the right time, he can make you do whatever he wants. And if by some miracle you are able to resist his manipulation and his deceit, then he has the power and the authority to make you do what he wants, to threaten you and bully you. And throughout the first book, the Wolf at the Door, you will see firsthand how Askvargr speaks of justice in forming the great army of Skaldland. He speaks of taking back what is theirs, of avenging an old war with the old Amber King of Woodland, who looted and burned and violated the people of southern Skaldland. But it becomes clear that Askvargr wants more than justice, if he wants justice at all. He wants maybe justice, but it's more blood that he's after, and power. He's interested in spells and rituals. Some sort of great work is at hand. And it is in this that I was inspired by sort of medieval alchemy and Gnostic traditions, twisted, of course, to serve a more fantastical end, and twisted by Askvargr's own mind and his beliefs. He is working black magic to serve a what could arguably be described as a noble end, at least in his mind, for sure. He is, in a way, trying to undo all the horrors that have already been done, but trying to make himself like a god in the process. And my numerous inspirations for Askvargr are they are both kind of subtle and kind of obvious, I think, because he is at times referred to as the Ash Wolf, of course, which is basically just the literal translation of his name. But he is also called the Plague of Rats because of how devious and dangerous he is. He is seen as this bringer of woe and death wherever he goes. And in a warrior society, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly is for the people he stands against. And he is the captain of the White Worm, this great warship, not really even like a Viking dragon ship, but more this monstrous magical war galley. Um, and he is a follower of the Crow God, this mythic god of death in the Skaldland religion and belief system. I mean, at least he is assumed to be a follower of the Crow God, and he speaks of the Crow God, but it's unclear if he even worships that. Um, in these names, these animals and monsters that are associated with Askvargr, I was sort of trying to invoke the many names of the real world Norse god Odin, right? Who is this two-faced god of magic, right? And he's associated with ravens and wolves and his multi-legged horse, right? He comes in many forms and wears many guises. And he is a god who breaks the mold of that culture and of reason in favor of a grander, more apocalyptic and dangerous agenda. Odin has this dark side in the form of Loki, right? His very own split personality. At least that's how a lot of modern interpretations paint it. And while Askvargr doesn't exactly suffer from such a mental break himself, he is still a two-faced trickster. He is dancing between this idea of the noble warlord, this kingly figure, and of the dangerous, manipulative sorcerer, right? He is cruel when he has to be, and he is stern. But deep down, I believe that he sort of cares about his two surviving children as much as he can care about anyone. And does that make him any better? Does that change how one should view this abominable human being willing to kill hundreds of thousands in order to serve his own ends? Askvargr bears within him as a warlord who sacrificed his own culture and who even goes against the wishes of his own king. He bears these elements of various Viking leaders like Svein Forkbeard, Knut the Great, Harald Hardrada, and Harald Fairhair, and even Olaf Tryggvason in a way. Although he's certain, if Christianity did exist in the world of the White Worm Chronicles, I do not believe Askvargr would dare worship the hanged god. Um, he but he certainly would dabble in the dark arts of various religions. He's the kind of guy who would have visited Egypt and the Middle East. He would have been to Asia and Russia and come back to his Nordic homeland with all these great wondrous secrets, and he would barely be recognizable for it. He would also find himself on good terms with various fictional characters, imperious and intelligent villains like Saruman of Many Colors, Count Dooku, Tywin Lannister, and even Doctor Doom, especially Doctor Doom. But unlike many of the others, these very slight, mild inspirations in aesthetic, Askvargr has a hair more not compassion per se, but perhaps you might call it a twisted sense of goodwill. In a way, he believes he is doing good. If nothing else, he is doing evil for a greater good. Just as the German scientists of the 1930s and 40s, perhaps, and how they believed that they were advancing science and protecting their people. Just as the monster that was Shiro Ishin committed atrocities for the Empire of Japan. Uh, Askvargr means to remake the world and better the world through violence and death, through magic. And even so, it's all for him. Still, it's all for him. Askvargr is a man who cares only about himself, and if he just so happens to better the world, and in the process of bettering himself and his family, who he believes he cares about, then so be it. Then let people treat him as a hero, treat him as a god for having done some good for them. It's for these reasons that I think that Askvargr is easily my the most fun and interesting villain I have ever written about thus far. His villainy is only matched by another in this very series, who is an evildoer revealed at the 11th hour, at the very end of this book, the Wolf at the Door. This mad dog, not nearly as smart as he wants you to believe he is, but whose malice and skill in the art of magic, and whose willingness to do bad things to see his own desires accomplished makes him almost as dangerous as the Ash Wolf himself. Um, so yeah, that is the Ash Wolf, the Plague of Rats, the White Worm, the hero of Skaldland, and the bane of Woodland and Wildren, and the other kingdoms of this part of the world. He is Askvargr the Great, a deadly, dangerous opponent, and he rules the day in many a time throughout this series. Uh, but only time will tell if he is vanquished in the end. So, if you would like to read more about the Ash Wolf, consider buying my book, The Wolf at the Door, book 1 in the White Worm Chronicles, and if you like, leave me a good review if you like the book, because God knows I need it. And like and subscribe here on YouTube if while you're at it. I would very much appreciate it. So, so long for now. I'll have more for you soon. Bye.